Let's Take This Outside with Marianne Iveson, the podcast where she speaks to athletes, outdoor professionals, and scientists about why they connect with nature.
Mercedes Nicoll is a 5-time national champion, has 8 World Cup podiums, and represented Team Canada at 4 Winter Olympics in snowboard halfpipe. Mercedes currently works in the winter at Whistler Blackcomb in the Ride with an Olympian program. She is the chair of the Canada Snowboard Athletes Council with a seat on the Canada Snowboard Board and is also on the Canadian Olympic Committee Athletes Commission. In 2020, Mercedes launched Dropping In, a podcast with Mercedes Nicoll. Please let me introduce our very first Olympian on Let's Take This Outside. Here is Mercedes Nicoll. Mercedes Nicoll, welcome to Let's Take This Outside. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're my first Olympian, by the way. I'm so honored by that.
First but not last, I'm sure.
I hope not. Do you ever just wake up every day and you're like, I guess I went to the Olympics 4 times? Do you ever just think about that? Just wake up.
No, I forget about it. I'm a normal human. I'm on to the next. What's next?
I want to talk about what's next too. But you have your own podcast, Dropping In with Mercedes Nicoll. How do you like being interviewed versus doing the interview?
That's a good question. I've never had that asked before.
It's very inside baseball. It's very inside podcasts.
It's super interesting. Being interviewed, I'm just so used to. It's been happening since I was 12. And now interviewing, I feel like I have so much inside knowledge on what questions to ask because I've been asked such dumb questions. I'm sure you're going to have great questions. But I've been asked, I remember when I was 14, I'm this is the biggest waste of my time. So it's cool to ask meaningful questions for sure.
Can I ask, okay, what's an example of a dumb question?
Every sportscaster asks it at the end of a run. How are you feeling right now? It's the same question over and over. You just finished. Oh, you even in football, how are you feeling? How are you feeling? It's the same question over and over. So I think that one's pretty stupid.
Is it stupid because you're just I'm just here to perform. Leave me alone for a hot second, right?
I think it's just not in depth at all. It's not it's just a broad question. And I'm sure I've asked it at the bottom of a half pipe to other athletes too. How are you feeling? You must be so stoked, or I don't know.
But coming from you, it's different, right? Because you have been there, you know exactly probably how they feel, right? So you're trying to empathize.
Right. But I would ask questions oh, how is the half pipe? A little bit more in depth. Oh, you had a little mess up there. Are you okay with that? Just a little bit more of an inside scoop rather than someone that doesn't really know the sport being meow, how do you feel about that?
Right. Because then they could go to curling and be how do you feel? Right.
It's a blanket question for everyone.
Yeah. I think I do ask your feelings about something in this, but I think it's more specific, but we'll get to it. I listened to some episodes. You're able to relate to other athletes that only other elite athletes can understand. So why do you do the podcast? I really want to promote the podcast that you're doing, first of all, but why do you do it?
I mean, I do it. I wanted to share my story as well as open up the opportunity to hear about other people's stories. My first series is about overcoming your fears because so many athletes have to fall down and get back up, and the elite athletes, their crashes are pretty monumental if you come to it. But also normal people in life, I had Tara Sloan on and she's had to reinvent herself time and time again. So that's even a fear. Just kind of diving deep and learning more about other people. I've been retired from snowboarding since 2018. So I wanted to learn what the heck people are doing and kind of get advice as well as give it to other people through the art of storytelling.
I want to get to your story, but I've asked other podcast guests this before in this vein, but you're at a totally different level. You're at this elite level. What did you learn from snowboarding, and what did you learn from being an Olympic athlete that you take into everyday life now that you're retired? Is it the resilience that you were just speaking of?
I don't know if it's resilience. That's definitely part of it, but it would be the drive and the passion. If you don't have a passion behind something you're doing, then it's going to flop. And then the drive of an athlete, I don't think there's anything like that out there in the world. I was just talking to a friend who was in a horrific car biking accident. She got hit by a truck biking, and she's recovering. And we talked about our recoveries and how like certain people are able to recover because they want to, and they're not taking no for an answer. So I think it's more that avenue. And it does have to do with resilience. You're totally right. But there's just so many different values that we hold dear to us as like elite athletes that honestly I didn't know about before. Like if I didn't reflect on being an elite athlete, I would have been like, I'm just a snowboarder.
Is there anything that like you feel now that maybe there's like way less pressure now and you're just kind of living your life? Like, is there a relief? Is there like a relief from when you were at the peak?
I think I look at snowboarding now. So the last Olympics in Japan, I was watching those and I was relieved not to be there. I was like, I don't want to be doing those tricks that they're doing now. Like, so that's definitely a relief. Like, and when I'm on my snowboard, I don't feel like I have anything really to prove anymore. I feel very like that was competing in halfpipe was a chapter and it's closed. And that was a long chapter of my life. That was over 20 years of my life.
You know what, before I get, like I'm talking to you like everyone knows exactly who, and I think a lot of people do know who you are, but I do want to dive into your story. I want to hear more. Let's go back. Where did the love of snowboarding and playing outside start? But you started skiing, correct?
Yeah, I grew up skiing. My whole family skied. I'm the black sheep. That's the snowboarder. Grew up skiing. My dad was supposed to go to the Olympics that I really didn't know about, but he broke his leg. So he wasn't able to go. We moved out to Whistler when I was 12 years old. And that's kind of mid 90s when snowboarding became like the cool thing that was happening. And I had skied everywhere on Whistler and Blackcomb, which are pretty big mountains. So I was like, oh, why don't I just try this and see if this is something that I like? And all my friends in high school were doing it. So I was like, well, that's something that I can do with them. And then I was also a pretty competitive figure skater when I lived in Toronto. So that came out with me to Whistler. But the figure skating world's so different. It's like you're friends with the people that you're figure skating against, but then it gets a little heated and then it's just a different world than snowboarding. So long story short, I chose snowboarding probably around 13, 14 when you kind of decide what sport you're actually going to like hone in on, and just loved it so much. And there was a halfpipe at the top of Blackcomb and people were riding halfpipe. I was like, I want to do that. I want to be where all the people are. And started entering little local competitions, and that went to provincial competitions. And provincials led me to being invited to junior nationals and junior worlds. And then it just snowballed. It became my life.
No pun intended.
Yeah. It became like my whole life, and like school sort of was there, but snowboarding revolved around like everything.
Were you completely obsessed with it at the time? Was it like, or did it feel like any kind of pressure?
I didn't feel pressure really at all. I guess maybe like if I was in the start of a border cross and like at the top of a competition, for sure I'd feel the pressure, but that was like pressure I put on myself to do what I needed to do. But when I was that young, no, I didn't know any better. I was just like in it, immersed in it, and just wanted to be on snow as much as possible.
Was there any kind of like fork in the road where you're like, I just enjoy this and do it? Or like, do you remember a point where you're like, oh, no, I want to make this a competition and you're a competitive person and that's like innate in you?
I wish I could say that there was this pinnacle moment that happened, but I feel like when you're in it, you don't reflect and realize anything. Even if I'm like, I've been on the podium nationally 5 times, I've been on World Cup podiums, like, and going to the Olympics. No, there's not like one moment where I think I'm a little too humble in that way. Like maybe after I'd gone to 4 Olympics and being like, oh, not that many people go to 4 Olympics. Right. Like that's kind of a thing.
I wanted to talk about that because going to 4 Olympics. So how many years is that? That's 16 years, right?
Yeah. And then like the 4 before. So it's like 20.
Okay. So
Usually depends what sport it is, but usually athletes age out, early 20s in a lot of Olympic sports?
It depends on the sport. Yeah. And snowboarding is such a new sport that who knows?
Going to 4 Olympics, like there's not many Canadians or not many people or athletes who have done that, right? Do you know the numbers on that?
I don't. I'm sure Adam Vancouver knows because he's gone to 4, and he was at my 4th, and he's like, Mercedes 4 is enough, and I was like, well, yeah, we're good.
When did you know? I was like, did you realize you're like, no, this is my last one? Did you know, like going into it, that it was your last one?
Oh yeah. I knew the last contest before. I was sitting like in Saas-Fee in Switzerland with a couple other like veterans that were going to their 3rd or 4th games, and we were sitting there, and all the young kids were like hyped to be there, and we were like, we're so done.
I'm tired.
Yeah, I'm old. But no, that was my redemption. Like I didn't even think I would go to 3. So the fact that I did 4, I'm just a stubborn human being.
So you are one of the best snowboarders in the world. You are kicking ass, and you're at the Sochi Olympics in 2014. And what happened?
Yeah, so if anyone remembers the Sochi Olympics, the snow quality was not preferable at all. So I went to do what was going to be my last practice run, and I thought those were going to be my last games. So I was like, I want to do all my tricks. I had a backside 900, which was my hardest trick, and I hadn't practiced it yet. So I went up and tried to do it, but the snow gave away on the takeoff, and when that happens, you can't get the full rotation around and initiation. Anyways, monumental crash from over 2 stories because a halfpipe wall is 22 feet high and you're going up beyond that. Smashed my hip and my face, not knowing that I was concussed at that time because my hip hurt the most. So I got up, went past the doctor, went up to see if I could snowboard again. It was not pretty nor easy. I did end up competing, and then that night realized that the black eye the black eye that was coming in under my eye may be a concussion, because I went to the nightclub on crutches, as one does as an Olympic athlete. And the lights and the music made me puke right away, and I hadn't had anything to drink, so I was like, okay, I think I'm concussed. So like self-diagnosed concussed.
And up to this point, had you had any kind of big accidents like that, or were you pretty lucky?
No, I definitely hit my head before. So this was probably my 3rd or 4th kind of big concussion. But I didn't know how long the recovery was going to be. You never know with a concussion. The one prior to that probably took like a 3-month recovery. So I was like, maybe this will be like 6 months. I don't know. 8 years later, I'm still realizing.
We were actually chatting about concussions even before I hit record, but what were some of the symptoms that just wouldn't go away for 8 years?
Well, for 2 years, I had a constant headache and was probably for at least a year sleeping at least 15 hours because my body was just mentally exhausted. And 8 years, just being able to snowboard at a high speed again. Like, even though I did 4 years later compete at Olympics, it for sure wasn't 100%. I was not 100%. And it's challenging because you can get through all these hoops to like pass these concussion protocols, but still know in the back of your head that you're not 100%. So yeah, I competed at the Olympics 4 years later, but 8 years it took me to realize, oh wow, you're like still getting better. And like right now I know I need sleep, but I would have this like fog over my head in the first 2 years. My speech was very slow. My personality was completely wiped and gone. I couldn't walk properly. So like a walk that would normally take me 10 minutes took me over an hour when I started walking again. So lots of things that I look back on, and then I'm proud to be where I am now.
Let's take this outside with Marianne Iveson.
You went back to the Olympics in 2018, like you said, your 4th Olympics. It's funny because I wrote in here, how did you feel?
Sorry.
But I feel like that's a very specific question, though, like going into your fourth Olympics. But we kind of already answered this too. You said you knew it was your last one. But were you just going to be like, I just, it was my last one. I want to perform. You had no expectations for yourself. What mind space were you in?
I had expectations that I wanted to land the 900 again. So the Olympics happened in February and December. I was kind of trying to overcome that hurdle of breaking through mentally and physically of trying that trick again because it'd been 4 years and I couldn't land it. I couldn't get it. I was like crying on the side of the half pipe trying to like overcome this barrier because it was like huge for me. And then once I got to the Pyeongchang games, I was like, I don't have a plan. I don't know what I'm going to do. My coach wasn't super helpful. So luckily, this godsend of the Canadian Olympic Committee hire like amazing people to be on the staff to help the athletes. And the sports psych that was at my first Olympics in 2006 that was working with Canada Snowboard was like the bookend to my Olympics. And she was in Pyeongchang and I grabbed her. I'm like, I need your help. And so we went and sat in the cafeteria and had a debrief and set a plan in place for what I was going to do for practice so that I could achieve the goals and feel like that I'd left everything and be proud of what I'd done. And for that long story short, I did end up landing the backside 900, my last run of practice. Which is so crazy to me because that's the going to be the last run of practice. 2014 pretty much took me out. And then last run of practice 4 years later, I landed it and I was like over the moon. I'd forgotten I still needed to compete and then I went up and competed and landed it twice. So
I was going to say, were you ready to go home even after the last practice run? You're like, yeah, I'm good.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I was like, I'm good. But then obviously that competitive spirit of me, I was like, okay, I like land it. And so in my first run, in snowboard halfpipe, it's a judge sport. And my first run, the judges didn't put me into semifinals. So I was like, okay, I gotta like do better my second run. And I did better my second run, got scored lower, I'm pretty sure, if memory serves. And then I was pissed. Like I say that the Olympics are an emotional roller coaster ride. They really are. Like you're on this high. I was so excited. I just landed this trick. And then like, thanks to the judging scores, I was like pissed, upset, so angry, confused, all the emotions from this high to this lowest of lows. And I decided that I could be mad for 2 days. And then I had to reflect and think, like you couldn't walk or talk or write your own name 4 years ago. So you should be pretty proud. And so then I was like, okay, well, you did not get a gold medal, not even close. But for me, I say it's a gold medal moment for myself.
Going from where, again, walking, talking, personality, gone, to landing the backside 900. Is that what it's called?
Backside 900. Yeah.
That's your own gold medal. That's your own like mental hurdle.
Yeah.
Can I ask when you see the kids like performing?
They were literally kids. They were like Chloe Ken was like 16 when I was coming back and I was 32 or something. And I was just like, I missed 2 years of a gap. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what just happened? I like turned to Kelly Clark, we're the same age. And I was like, wait, what happened in 2 years?
What do you think when you see that? How extreme the tricks are getting? And is it the technology? Is it what is it?
Well, again, snowboarding for me started when I was 13 really. These guys are starting when they're 2. They're starting on snowboards. So they have that. And why not push the boundaries of sport? Like if they have it in them, that ability, heck yeah. I mean, it's been a while since it's been pushed this hard and girls are doing doubles and like now they're doing triples. I just watched X Games and off the big air, they're doing triples. So like they're really getting close to the men, which is so rad to see. And hopefully it changes that kind of culture of like the difference between girls and guys in snowboarding. Cause that's that when I was growing up is definitely something.
So you think that, explain that a little bit.
The culture?
Yeah, the culture.
Can I explain the culture of snowboarding? No.
You have 10 minutes. Okay?
Yeah. I know. I was debriefing with like my friend who was a mentor, and I was like, we should do a podcast on like the culture of snowboarding and women in it, because we were on the first all women's snowboard team, which was kind of unheard of back in the day, because it's a boys club. It's through and through boys club. Like if you listen to any of the podcasts that have to do with snowboarding, it's mostly led by men. And luckily they're having girls come in and talk and share their stories. But it was definitely like for sure challenging. You'd be like the one girl on the men's snowboard team, the token girl.
There's, we've talked about this a lot on this podcast, is making the outdoors and outdoor sport more accessible for everyone. So of course in snowboarding, but you see it like in cycling, right? You see it in so many other sports, right? But also seeing that women's sport, especially cycling, is getting more attention now is unbelievable. But like, yeah, it's interesting to see, especially like you've been competing for a very long, or you were competing for a very long time, right? So, yeah, if you do release it, please let us know and we'll share it.
It's going to be like super vulnerable, be like, oh, this sucked and this, I don't know.
I would listen to it. What does your life look like now?
So I live in Whistler, British Columbia, Canada. I'm very, very lucky. This is where I grew up and my family is. It's currently snowing outside, and I work on the mountain. I do the program called Ride with an Olympian, which is like a private lesson with myself. And I'm lucky enough to partake in some of the women's camps that happen up here. So it's like a full weekend with just girls group. And then I have my podcast, which I do 10 episode series usually about things that are near and dear to my heart and whatever I want to talk about.
How do people sign up for the Ride with an Olympian program? Like, how do you even like get access to that?
Yeah, that's just on the Whistler Blackcomb website. So it's in private lessons. Yeah, it's just a private lesson, really. But I have anywhere from people that have never snowboarded before to experts. So I get to see their personal growth on a snowboard, and it makes me over the moon excited.
What's your favorite kind of person to coach? Someone who's just eager with like no experience, or someone who knows it all and is like...
It really doesn't matter. Like if I can give like a little tip to help them get better or take them to somewhere that they've never been before, or if I'm like literally holding their hands and yelling at them, because I do end up yelling at people. I do love kids too. I have like this group of kids that come over from Hawaii who are like so rad. So yeah, it doesn't, everyone's super fun. Everyone's different, right?
You love snowboarding. Obviously, it's still part of your life every day. But what other sports do you do? What else do you like to do?
Okay, I'm like looking around my house, and I'm like, okay, I have 2 snowboards in the corner and skis. I have a golf little putt set up because I'm addicted to golf.
Really?
I might like golf more than snowboarding.
Mercedes Nicoll just said.
I love it. Like, yeah. Love tennis. I feel like I love all the summer sports. I'm not a good biker though. You're a biker, aren't you?
I'm not super great, but I just started cycling in the pandemic. I do like gravel and road, and I love it because I can like go to so many different places that I can't go like on foot. So
totally fair. I hate jogging, but I do it just for fitness. And then I'll do like Instagram jog tours. Some people love them, some people hate them, but it really gets me through like a 3 to 5K so I don't get bored.
What's an Instagram jog tour? Like you just bring people with you on Instagram?
I'll like do little clips and be like, oh, it's beautiful here. Oh, I'm dying. I'm actually haven't done a jog in a while. Like just like a couple snippets from the jog.
You're in Whistler. What are your other favorite parts of Canada? Where else do you love? Where else do you love to play? Where else do you love to snowboard? Where else do you love to visit?
Oh, in Canada. I mean, the Rockies are beautiful, but honestly, Whistler's got my heart for sure. I love this community. There's just so many activities to do and lakes and the mountains. I did, when we traveled, love going to Quebec City. Like, what a gorgeous old place. I love a little like jaunt to Toronto just to get into a concrete jungle for a second. Used to have a lot of friends there, still have some old family friends there, so it's nice to visit. Where else? I spent so much time in the States that's kind of like my go-to. I lived in California for about 9 years on and off. and then worked at summer camp in Oregon. So the West Coast is like my mecca.
This is one of my favorite questions to ask. And we haven't really touched on nature quite yet, but everything you do is outside. So I'm looking forward to this. What role does nature play in your everyday, in like your sport and your healing?
More now than I ever knew. And also thanks to the pandemic. During the pandemic, the community here offered this thing called forest bathing.
Yes, I know exactly what forest bathing. I've done it actually. Yeah.
Okay. So I was like, this is stupid. But I had to try it as part of my job. It was like to try this forest bathing. And so I was like, all right, let's give this a go. This seems like the stupidest thing ever. And when I did it, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm always on such a mission that I don't actually appreciate nature. I am, we're such busy humans, especially at least in the community of Whistler. We're like all A-type personalities, like, got to do this better. And to take that moment to like not have a care in the world of timing and look up at the sky. Like, how often do you go on a walk and look up at the sky? Like, that isn't something I've done. So that definitely brought me closer to nature and like reminded me to chill the F out way more often. And that's kind of something that I've brought into my life. And so I always noticed that snowboarding, but because it's like this soulful feeling of like, yeah, I'm doing this and I'm like in the trees and I love it and I'm in nature. But I not until now put that together that I like did that in the mountains. I do that in the mountains, but never have taken it down into the valley when I'm on foot. Does that make sense?
So when you're on the snowboard on the mountain, you have a very present feeling. You're very present, meditative.
Yeah.
But when you're like walking around Whistler and you're just it's a beautiful place. Like it is like unbelievable, right? So now when you're in the valley, when you're on foot or maybe going for a hike, you just notice it more?
I take it in a bit more, yeah. Because what I always say about snowboarding is that I hope it doesn't lose its soulfulness for people. Because some people could pick up snowboarding and be like, yeah, I snowboard. But really, they're just like going up, doing a run, and then going in for drinks or something like that. Whereas like if you really love snowboarding, you're like going to go up and just like be one with nature and enjoy that moment and not like try not to be with the masses of people because it does get busy, but enjoy that like turn, even if it's like crappy day out. It's this like joy that a lot of like old school snowboarders and I hope the new school snowboarders get as well.
One of my favorite, I call it nature feature. One of my favorite nature features in the winter is when it's like freshly fallen snow and it like deadens the sound and it like you can like almost hear your own heartbeat. It sounds so like dead in the forest. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. That'll be me walking out in like the next half hour.
Also, I love that you went from snowboarding for like forever, and then you're like, I'm still gonna snowboard. I'm gonna teach others how to snowboard. I'm gonna share my passion. I'm gonna share my life, and I'm assuming this is like your life plan now, right?
Who knows? I'm open to opportunities for sure. I'd love to travel to like all the resorts and check them out, but who knows what's gonna happen? I did try the 8 to 5 Muni job, and it's just not my jam.
Well, you're doing great. And it's been an absolute honor chatting with you. Mercedes, thanks so much. And listen to her podcast, Dropping In with Mercedes Nicoll. What's next for the podcast?
Right now, I'm working on a series of parents of elite athletes. So, yeah, athletes that I've had on the series already. I'm getting their parents and the take on like what it's like to be a parent and like, you know, the lifelong question that every parent has is like, well, what did your parents do? So I'm going to get into that.
Will you have your parents on?
Yeah. I was going to have them on as my first episode. And then I was like, oh, I'm not ready. I'm going to have them on as my last episode.
Yes, you have to have your parents on. Okay. Looking forward to that. Thank you so much. And thanks for the convo and have fun at work.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thanks for listening. For more Let's Take This Outside, go to letstakethisoutside.ca.
Produced and distributed by the Sound Off Media Company.